Okay, looks like we're recording. So welcome, folks. It's good to see you, at least electronically, I guess. I hope you're having a nice start to your warm summer weather. I know I am in Woodstock. It's very hot but humid today. So I just want to tell you a little bit about who I am and where I'm from. My name is Beth Bernard. I'm the Education Director at Connecticut Forest and Park Association. Our mission at CFPA is to connect people to the land to protect forests, parks, and open spaces, and also walking trails in Connecticut for the future generations. So I get out there and I teach people about nature, and I teach people about how awesome it is to get out onto the trails. It's a great job. So CFPA was established in 1895. We were one of Connecticut's first nonprofit conservation organization. The state looks a lot different now than it used to in 1895. There was a lot fewer trees, there was less forest, and CFPA's work over the years has kind of created, helped to create a lot of the forest tapestry that we have in our state that's so beautiful. So you can learn more about us at ctwoodlands.org. So we also co-manage a place called Goodwin Conservation Center in Hampton. Goodwin is a great partnership between Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection and CFPA, and it's also supported by the Friends of Goodwin Forest. It's in Hampton, Connecticut, which is in the northeast corner. It's a beautiful place. It has beautiful wildflower gardens right now. That's what I would recommend if you're looking for another outdoor place to go and you don't mind driving over to the quiet corner. The gardens are in full bloom right now, and it's all native wildlife friendly plants, and we're also having a plant sale starting June 15th. So check that out if you can. So you want to be a backyard naturalist. I'm so glad, first of all, that you showed up and that this is something that interests you. I know a lot of folks, me included, Meg, sorry, sometimes I look at the chat, by the way, and that's why I'm laughing, because I saw Meg said, go Goodwin, yay. Anyway, becoming a naturalist is something that not everybody understands. And, you know, sometimes people are like, are you a naturist? If you know what a naturist is, we are not that. You can Google it. I won't get into it. But it's an exciting journey, and I would consider my journey as a naturalist a lifelong journey. So it's something that never ends. I think that's the great part about it. We're all home right now, me included. We're home more. Unless you're working, and if you're an essential worker, thank you. And chances are, if you have been home more, you've been noticing maybe some animals and plants in your backyard that you have never noticed before. You might be curious about them, so this is the perfect webinar for you. A naturalist is basically someone who's knowledgeable about natural history. That's the bones of it. But a naturalist can be so much more than that. So what is a naturalist? A naturalist, like I said, can be an expert in the animals and plants, mushroom, lichen, all sorts of natural phenomena around us. They can also be scientists. And they often share their knowledge with other scientists. Naturalists are often teachers. There we go. I think that the best kind of naturalist is someone who shares their discoveries with others. That's the important part, whether it's someone in your family or actually teaching a class. That still makes you a naturalist. Naturalists are often stewards because they observe the natural world. They often take steps to help protect it. I think it goes hand in hand. And that turns into activism often. So you'll see many naturalist folks helping to protect open space, trails, forests in our state, endangered species, all sorts of things. And lastly, naturalists are often, but not all the time, but often authors or artists. So some of my favorite naturalists are folks that really, that understand animals or plants, but through the different arts, like writing about them or drawing them. John J. Audubon, great example of a naturalist who was an artist, and he ended up basically wanting to explore all of the different types of birds by drawing them. And then all of that, his field guides and everything were created from there. So it was amazing. Some well-known naturalists. I'm in the center there, Bern Heinrich. If you've never heard of him, you never read any of his stuff, I would definitely recommend you pick up one of his books. He's written many. He's an amazing artist, great at drawing what he sees in nature, and also a really good author. His books go by in a flash, for me at least, and they're also a lot of fun. He has a great way of helping people connect with the patterns of nature. Edwin Wade Teale I had to include because he is a Connecticut naturalist. In 1959, he moved to Hampton, Connecticut, which is the same town that Goodwin Conservation's in. Oh, sorry about that. Thank you, Kathy. Edwin Wade Teale, anyway, he moved to Hampton in 1959, and he had his own preserve there, his home and everything, that is now an Audubon preserve called Trailwood, a Connecticut Audubon preserve. It's a great place to go. You can kind of walk around. You can look at, he had an old writer's cottage by the lake, and they let you go in there. It's a really neat place. So he wrote a lot of great books about observing nature in Connecticut, which is very relevant and very interesting. And last on the right is one of my favorite naturalists. And today I actually realized is actually her birthday, so this is fitting. Rachel Carson. You probably know her from Silent Spring, which is a book she wrote about the pesticide DDT and its harmful effects on animals and humans. But she also wrote a lot of other books, many about the sea. She had a home on coastal Maine. So one of her books was called The Edge of the Sea, and it was just all about what she observed and the different animals that she observed on the coastline. So she's a really great one as well. So it can be sometimes a little overwhelming. For me, I think for anyone, if you look at these amazing naturalists, authors, experts, to think, I don't really feel like I could be at that level. I'm just kind of curious about what's happening in the backyard. The good thing about naturalist studies is that really anybody can do it. And like I mentioned before, the great thing about nature is even if you've been a naturalist your whole life for 50 years, there's still stuff for you to learn. There's still new species being discovered all the time on this planet. Even our state has so many ecological resources. So you will never be bored if this is a hobby of yours, which is great. We don't need to be, this generation's Audubon. Hey, if that happens, that's great. But what's important about being a naturalist is that, if you're passionate about something, the people in your life are going to start learning about it as well. They're going to pick up on that. So there's a few important parts to becoming a naturalist or just having a naturalist mindset. And I'm gonna kind of go through those one by one, and I'm also gonna go through a lot of resources that you could use to help you kind of figure out, species ID, tools and tips, things like that. And then we'll have a little quiz, and there'll be some time for questions. So the first thing you need to do if you're thinking about having that naturalist mindset is narrow your focus. So there's a couple ways that people approach this journey, I'll call it. One is that there's some naturalists that know a bit about everything, right? They know some about birds, some mammals, a little bit about everything. Other naturalists are really experts in a certain topic. And if you're brand new to this subject, if you've never studied nature or biology or ecology, I would really suggest that you pick a topic and you go with it for a while. The reason I suggest that you narrow your focus first is that it is so easy to get overwhelmed. So just in Connecticut, for example, there's 1,400 species of plants and 84 species of mammals and 330 plus species of birds just in Connecticut, right? And that's not including what's all over this whole entire world. So it's easy to kind of be like, this is a lot and maybe someone else can learn that, but this is too much for me, right? So that's why I recommend you just pick a topic. Maybe you feel really into birds right now and you really go into learning the birds in your backyard. And the great thing about that is once you really start learning and feeling comfortable with the birds in your backyard, that'll lead you to other topics. So it might lead you to insects because you're learning what the birds eat. You're watching and observing what the birds eat, and then you're wondering what that is, and that's going to cause you to ask more questions, things like that. So it's very easy to just be like, I want to identify everything all at once. But I really encourage you to narrow your focus at first, and you'll get there. You'll get to the generalist point of view. Next, be ready to get outdoors in all the seasons. I know it seems obvious, but it's sometimes in our world of technology, hello Zoom, it's harder than it looks sometimes to kind of get outdoors. Sometimes it helps just to put it on a calendar or have a pattern like every day at 4 o'clock, I take 20 minutes and I sit on the back deck, that kind of thing. And whether it's a habit or whether you do it when you can, just take the time to be outside with a certain mindset, right? So you're not going to be outside with a mindset of like, oh, I got to check my email, or, oh, what are we going to have for dinner? This is the time when you can kind of leave everything else behind. If you want to wander slowly in nature, wandering is one of my favorite things. Sometimes I have my exercise hikes, which are really fast, but when I wander, I'm just looking. I'm out there with the intention of looking. And just kind of have it on the mindset that you're there to observe nature. If you find it hard to do this, perhaps you've got a lot going on in your day. Maybe you work all day or whatever is going on for you. Like, just try to include these kind of things in your everyday life. So if you're bringing the garbage barrels out, take a minute just to stop and observe, see if there's any bats flying over or whatever. If you're not able to go outside on a certain day, position your favorite chair next to the window. I do that at my house, and I end up seeing a lot of cool stuff, some birds and things like that. Also, just a reminder for everybody, make sure that you understand how to be safe outdoors in all the seasons, right? So how do you avoid getting too cold or overheating, you know, making sure you're wearing the right clothes, things like that. And there's also certain risks to being outside in the different seasons, like right now and throughout the summer and fall, we have the risk of ticks. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to protect yourself against ticks, and people have many different opinions. I'm happy to share mine later if you'd like, but you might all have your own ideas too. Oh yeah, Kathy Ann said photographers can be on my naturalist slides too. I agree. I totally agree. Photographers are some of the best naturalists. Thanks, Kathy Ann. So our next step in our naturalist journey is practicing our observation skills. So you wouldn't think that often that observing is really a skill, but it's a very important skill that you can hone. If you go out into the woods with a naturalist or a meadow or whatever habitat, the naturalist is going to be more likely to notice things that maybe the average person wouldn't notice. And that's because their observation skills are really strong. There's some different things that you can do to hone your observation skills. First is you can just go outside and practice, right? So when you're going outside every day or every week, whatever, try to go to the same spot at least a couple times repetitively. You can sit there, you can stand, you can take a slow stroll, whatever suits your fancy. But the purpose of that is you're going to start looking at the same area repeatedly, and you'll start to notice new things every time you go. When we walk through the woods just to walk, often we miss a lot of things. And going to the same place over and over really helps you notice what's going on in that one place. One thing I love to do is go out with kids. I think it's partially because kids are closer to the ground than I am, but they tend to notice so much more than I do. I also, with my adult brain, I think I tend to not notice things that I've seen a million times before. And the kids will notice them right away. They'll notice the salamander, they'll notice the flower coming up, or the insects. So that said, if you do go out with kids, be prepared to maybe not see wildlife unless that child can be quiet. Sometimes I also like to go out alone. Going out alone really, really has benefits. Even if you're not with a child, if you're with a fellow adult, it's the temptation to talk is huge, and we're social creatures, right? So we just want to talk to each other when we're walking and exploring and saying, oh, look at this, look at that. When I go out alone, I see so much more than if I go out with somebody else. It's because I'm quiet, and I'm quiet in my mind, and I'm observing. I have that observation mindset, and the wildlife is a little less threatened by me. Also, there's still, I'm still a predator in their habitat, but often if I can be quiet, I'm a lot more likely to see wildlife. So when you're out there at your special spot that you go to over and over, or even just anywhere outside, pay attention to all your senses. So you want to listen, you want to touch things as long as you know that they're safe, right? We're not touching poison ivy and things like that. You want to smell, and you want to look. You want to use all those senses, and take turns with them. If you're just sitting there, take turns focusing on each of those senses, and use your eyes in a different way. So you can look broadly on a landscape view, look on a point far away, and then you can look up to a point really, really close to you, like a little blade of grass with an ant on it, right? So these are different ways to use your eyes as well, so you start to notice more things. All of this practice of observing is really helpful for your natural skills, but it's also really good for our mental health. This is actually one of the, I don't know, I feel like it's a secret to the naturalist life that not a lot of people talk about, that, you know, when you're able to sit still and observe, you become in a state of mindfulness. And now a lot of folks are talking about mindfulness now as a kind of a mental health practice, a way to have a healthy mind. So it's a great way to get there. I prefer that because it also helps my busy mind have something to focus on, right? I'm like focusing on my environment and not on myself. So once we're out there, we're observing, we need to cultivate our curiosity, right? We can watch nature all we want, but the point of being a naturalist is basically asking yourself never-ending questions about nature. And that's how you keep learning, right? I think in school, when we were, I'll just speak for myself. When I was growing up in school, I was not encouraged to ask questions, but the best kind of learning that I've ever done has been when I've had some really sincere curiosities and gone and tried to discover the answer. Every question you answer, it gives you another question, right? It's a never-ending cycle of questions and answers. So ways to cultivate your naturalist curiosity. Every day, ask yourself a question about something you see or something you've discovered, and see if you could find the answer to that question that day or that year. Sometimes it takes a while. And tracking our observations is very important as a naturalist. We can have a great time. It's good for us. It's entertaining. It's good for our mental health. But also what we're doing as naturalists is we are observing the world, and we're getting some really important information about the world. And so great naturalists are able to share that information in different ways, either through photography or writing or scientific journals, all of that. The importance of tracking observations is from the fact that our brains can be clouded by either perception or fuzzy memory, like me. If I don't write it down, it's gone. And we want to be able to observe over time. That's a really important thing. I can't even tell you how many springs have come up in my life where I noticed this certain wildflower popping up in my yard, and I like totally forgot that flower would pop up in my yard, because it's been a year since the last spring. And the seasons change so quickly. So it's very valuable to track your observations. Also, we can start to observe patterns, right? If you go to that same place over and over again within the week, different times of day, different seasons, you're gonna start to observe, okay, what is the baseline for this area? Maybe there's like always a robin around or two, right? But you rarely see crows. So maybe the next day, if you see a crow, oh, that's a little different. I wonder why. Okay, so you can start to notice. And then you'll also start to notice the seasonal patterns and the things that change during the seasons. What plants come at what month, that's a big one. Things like that. So this feeds into a practice called phenology. So phenology is the study of how climate affects the timing of certain biological events. So right now, as a naturalist, observing nature, it's super important that we keep track of what we see and when, not only so we can understand it, but so everybody can understand how climate change is affecting the animals and plants and people around us, right? So, for example, on the left there's some maple syrup. I've been involved in making syrup since 2008, I think. So it's been a while, and I've noticed over the years, as our climate has changed, the sugaring season has changed. So we used to start tapping trees a bit later. Well, later than now, but it would be like mid-February-ish. This year, I know some people in my town started tapping late January, right? So I'm noticing this pattern over many, many years. The other two pictures, the red-winged blackbird in the middle and the trillium flower on the right, those are some of my favorite signs of spring. So when I see those coming, I know spring is here. This is a great thing. I hear the frogs calling, things like that. So scientists are noticing, and they're studying, that the timing of, you know, when the blackbird comes and when those spring ephemeral flowers are coming out, the timing of these things is often changing, and that affects everything in the ecosystem, right? That affects a lot of other animals and plants. So as we continue to live in a world with a changing climate, these things are going to be increasingly important. Sit spot. Yes, Lance. Lance, do you do a sit spot? You can tell me later. I'm just curious. So our next step in our naturalist journey is to use the right tools. So this is a fun thing to delve into. There's so many fun naturalist tools that you can use, and a lot of them, you know, when I was first starting in this field, we would take our like big bulky field guide out into the field in a backpack, and then we get back problems, right? So, but now we have apps and we have all sorts of great tools. So I'm going to go through those a bit. The one request I have of you is that you don't get caught up in the tools. It's so easy to get distracted by a fun app or overly involved in the tools and figuring out what the name of something is. But really, it's most important that you're noticing the patterns. If you can't name whatever that animal or plant is, that's okay. What's most important is that you're observing it and noticing its patterns. Eventually, you'll name it, you'll figure it out, you'll find someone who knows what it is, right? So we don't want to be spending too much time stuck in a field guide or an app if we can avoid it. And I'm going to teach you some tools so you can use them a little more easy. A naturalist toolkit, right? If you had a backpack you're bringing out, or just your little bin that you want to put in the back of your car, this is what would be your naturalist toolkit. Binoculars, incredibly helpful when you're birding. If you're slightly blind like me, I tend to bird by ear, but I always like to have my binoculars there so I can get a better look at things. A loop, which is just a magnifier that's going to help you look at the buds. You can identify buds by like different patterns on the scales. You can look at tiny insects with it, things like that. Field notebook is very important. This is separate from your observation recording. If you have a field notebook, it's just going to help you remember what you saw and when you're out there. Because I know I don't remember. A camera, luckily, it's so easy now to have you got a camera on your phone and you just snap a picture of something. I do that when I'm hiking all the time because I don't always have my field guide or I don't want to stop. Audio recording, also you can record bird sounds, things like that. Aquatic and butterfly nets, those are two different kind of nets. Just make sure you know that they're different, because if you use a butterfly net in the stream, you'll just ruin it. There's things like for collection, like plant presses, collection jars, things like that. Weather app, always got to keep in track of that weather. and your field guides and ID apps and the right clothing. And I want to talk a little bit about permits and collecting. A lot of folks don't know this, so I think it's really important to mention that there are some permits required, and there are some places you can collect animals, plants, or mushrooms, and some places you can't. So historically, naturalists would make collections, right? If they wanted to learn about dragonflies, they would take specimens from the wild, they would preserve them. That's why we have amazing natural history museums, you know, things like that. Nowadays, we have so much technology that, and so many people are interested in this kind of thing, that we recommend that you're not collecting. You're not collecting animals or plants unless you absolutely have to. Maybe you're working on a project for the Master Naturalist program, things like that. Obviously, you need to keep track of what is a rare or endangered species, right? If you find a species that's rare or endangered, we leave it there. In terms of plants, please don't collect plants from state parks and forests. That's not legal. You can collect mushrooms. Someone passed that legislation recently in the last few years that you can actually forage mushrooms from state parks and forests. But I would always just check before you're collecting, right? Give the property owner a call, whether it's the state park or nature preserve or a private property even. In terms of animals, I would say let it be, right? We don't really, let's not make a practice of collecting animals. If you have to for like a project, or perhaps you're tagging and releasing, things like that, there are permits that you need from DEEP. The permit is called a scientific collector's permit. And I think it's $25, and it's a 1-pager form. It's very easy to do. There's other laws besides the Endangered Species Act. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act also protects, excuse me, migratory birds. And it doesn't matter if that bird is alive or dead. And it also protects the parts of birds like feathers, eggs, and even nests, right? So it's technically not legal to take a nest of a migratory bird, even if you find it on the ground, that kind of thing. I'd be happy to answer any questions about permits and any of that later, but I think the rule of thumb and of common sense caring for nature is don't take it, take a picture instead. If you have to take it, keep in mind, you know, how many of the same thing there are around there, and you want to only take one sample if there's multiples. So ways to record your observations. There's a number of different ways. You could make your own nature journal, which is a lot of fun. You could use a guided journal, which is print, or you could do an app or a web-based kind of recording. So it really depends on what your overall goal is in your naturalist journey. So if your overall goal is, I want to get to know the nature in my backyard, I want to connect with nature, I want to learn what's out there, I would say you should make your own nature journal. And you don't have to be a great artist, like, well, this person was, I would say, a simple artist. But you don't have to draw things at all. You could write notes. You could just write the date, the weather, and what you saw. You could even write songs about nature, whatever you would want to do in your nature journal. The point is that that is a vehicle to help you connect with nature. Guided journals are fun. There's some great ones out there. This Naturalist Notebook, I highly recommend it. The first half of it talks about how to be a naturalist, and the second half is a month by month, year by year calendar where you can just put I saw red-winged blackbird May 17th. And then you can see year by year comparing, which is really useful. So if you want to have that year-over-year data, use something like that. Finally, the apps. If your overall goal is you want to get usable data that you can share with people, I would use an app, because the great thing about apps is that they're so easy. They take very little time. They don't weigh you down. And there's many where you can record an observation, the date, the time, the weather conditions, and you can easily kind of export that, send it to somebody, compare it with other people's data. So apps really are all about data, right? So you're not going to get as close of a connection with nature as you would if you sat in the woods and just like drew the plants that you saw, but you're going to be able to communicate a list of data. So really think about what is your goal when going out, and that'll tell you how to observe and how to record your observations. So I want to stop for a second and see if anyone has any questions. Mariana asked, is there a way we can take a picture of a bird's nest without disturbing them? Like, for example, if it's in a branch that is a little high. I mean, yeah, that's not a problem at all, as long as you're not getting too close. And it's honestly, every bird species is a little different. You know, I know, for example, bald eagle, even if you get kind of to the base of the tree that their nest is in, they'll get a little flighty. And you don't want to disturb if there's young in there, especially. But yeah, if you get a good zoom lens too, a lot of people have taken great pictures of birds' nests from afar without bothering them at all. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to type them in. Looks like we're good. So I'm going to go through this quick. There's so many field guides out there. Speaking of becoming overwhelmed, if you go to the field guide section in the bookstore or just like on Amazon, whatever, it's hard to know which ones to get. So I wanted to tell you about some of my favorites and tell you why I love them. The Sibley's Bird Guide to Birds is I think it's the ultimate birder's guide. I love using it. It's set up in great sections where you can look up your bird by type of bird, and it also helps you learn about birds. So the Newcomb's Wildflower Guide, if you're really into wildflowers, this is perfect time of year for wildflower viewing. This is good. It's color coded by flower, which for me is very easy to follow. You look at the flower and you look at how many petals the flower has, and that'll really narrow down your search, and you'll be able to figure out what kind of flower you got. The National Audubon Society Field Guide to Trees. So Audubon has a whole range of field guides. I especially like their tree guide just because there's some great pictures of the leaves and bark and seeds and stem. So for me, looking at a drawing versus looking at a picture, I just love looking at a picture. That's my personal preference. It's also separated out by color, things like that, color of the flowers, etc. And for winter tree ID, when there's no leaves on the trees and there's no seeds to look at, things like that, that's a harder time to identify a tree because all you can really look at is the branches and the bark. So this book by Michael Washtek is called Bark, and it's got great images of bark, and it's the common trees that you're going to find in New England. It's a real easy one to use. 4 more, and then that's it. There's a lot of Stokes guides as well as Peterson guides out there. One of my favorite Stokes guides is the Guide to Animal Tracking and Behavior. The reason I find this one awesome is because not only will it tell you what like a fox track looks like, but it'll tell you the behavior patterns, the general behavior patterns of a fox. and why they do what they do, where they're looking for food, where they can be found. So it's really helpful if you're out there tracking mammals, because you want to look in the right habitat and you want to look in the right area. Freshwater invertebrates of North America. If you ever go in a stream or a pond and you scoop with a net and you find a little insect or creepy crawly, an invertebrate, this is a great guide to figure out what you found. There's some color images in there that are blown up, and you can learn how to count the legs to see if it's an insect. If it's 6 legs, it's an insect. If it's more, it's not. Caterpillars of Eastern North America. I have been waiting for a caterpillar book, I feel like, for years, and this finally came out. The pictures are amazing. Sometimes it's like a couch read for me. And it also tells about host plants, because caterpillars, many, are very specific as to what kind of leaf from what plant they'll eat. So this tells you, what the host plant is and what it looks like, etc. Also, what it's going to be when it's a butterfly, and a mushroom. A lot of people call Goodwin about mushrooms. A lot of people are into mushrooms, and mostly they want to know, can I eat this? There are so many kinds of mushrooms out there, and I would recommend you always double checking your mushroom ID before you stick anything in your mouth. But this guide in particular, it's very clear on the top whether it's edible or toxic, which is something I like, because if someone calls me and asks me, I can just flip through and let them know, well, this is what the guide says, but I wouldn't eat anything you're not sure about ever. So using a field guide there is a skill to using a field guide. A lot of people, what they do is they tend to, and we all do this, sometimes when I'm in a hurry, I do this, they just tend to look through at the pictures and see if they can compare it to what they found. The great thing about field guides, though, is there's a key. Most good field guides have a key in the beginning that will help you narrow down your search. So that way you're not leafing through the field guide and then not seeing anything after 20 minutes and then giving up and going on Google and then not really being sure about what you found in Google, right? So use the key first. And the key also will help you learn about, it might talk about the different body parts of a bird, or is a tree's branching opposite or alternate, right? So you'll learn more about these animals and plants as well. Then that'll help you narrow it down, find the closest matches. And then you want to always check the range and the habitat if that field guide talks about that, because often I have inadvertently identified a bird and then realized, oh, this can only be found in Texas. Whoops. Right? There's a small chance, like there might be a migratory bird, or there's some quirk that you actually found a Texas bird in Connecticut, whatever. But chances are you should make sure the range and habitat match up. And then most importantly, like I was saying with the mushrooms, whether you're using a field guide or an app, always confirm your ID. So this is also how we learn as naturalists, is that you might know someone, or you might maybe go to a class at Goodwin or somewhere else, maybe the Master Wildlife Conservationist program. Whoops, sorry about that. And you might think, oh, this really looks like a redback salamander, but I'm not really sure. So confirm it with someone, especially if it's something you're eating. But that's how we learn to ID, is we ask a friend or ask an expert if we're right. This is just an example of a simple key. So those keys in the field guides are called dichotomous keys. So if we were gonna, let's say we're gonna key out A. If we were going to key out A, we would start at 1A. Wings are covered by an exoskeleton or not? What do you think? Put in the chat. Are the wings covered by an exoskeleton is not see-through. It's kind of like a skeleton on the outside. So it's a outside protector. No, Kathy Ann says no. So good job, Kathy Ann. They are not covered by an exoskeleton. So then we go to step 3. Do the wings point outward from the body or towards the rear of the body? And we can see that the wings don't point out, they point towards the rear of the body. So this is the B, right? That's super simple, but those are what those keys are all about. All right, if you want a reference book throughout the whole year, I would recommend these two. We use these in the Goodwin Master Naturalist program. This Connecticut Wildlife is actually out of print, but you can still find copies on Amazon. Call me if you ever want to borrow one of Goodwin's, or you could join the Master Naturalist class and use it there. And this Naturally Curious is a great book. It goes month by month through you know, what you could discover throughout the year, which is a lot of fun. It's got great images, things like that. That was updated in 2019. I would recommend that as a really important reference for you. Apps. So if you've ever used apps, they are, like I mentioned, very useful for naturalist skills. There's these 3 that I really enjoy using. First is iNaturalist. So with iNaturalist, you can be out in the field, you just like snap a photo of what you found that you want to try to figure out. And it's got a way of identifying that. It's kind of a crowdsourced kind of identification. If 7 other people or 25 or whatever have said, oh, this is a trillium flower, then it's going to give you that as a suggestion. That is a trillium flower. And then the great thing about iNaturalist too is you could be a beginner and go on there and you can get some great IDs, but also scientists and expert naturalists go on there all the time and provide IDs. So it's a great way of figuring things out. Also, what you could do is you can kind of create groups on there. Like if a bunch of people are exploring a certain area, you can interact with people. You can see what other people have identified all around the world, which is really fun. Seek in the middle, that is a version of iNaturalist that is a little bit simplified. It's great for kids. You can earn like badges if you ID a certain number of things. So you try that out. I know the last webinar I did, there was an adult who was like, hey, it's not just for kids, I love Seek, right? So it's either one is great to use. Leaf Snap is much like iNaturalist, but it's really just for leaves. So you snap a picture of the leaf and it'll give you a list of likely leaves that you can choose from to help you identify that. So when we're thinking about birds, there's 2 great bird apps. The Cornell Lab does these both. Merlin is for bird ID, and it's so user-friendly because it'll ask you a set of questions like what color is the bird, how big is the bird, what's your location, what's the date, that kind of thing. And it narrows your search, and then it gives you a list of birds, and you can look through that list and really figure out what you have. eBird is a great way to track and share your sightings. So if you're really into birding, you can make yourself a life list. Birders have something called a life list, which is all the birds they've seen throughout their whole life. You can store your lists on there. You can share them with other people. You can upload photos or sounds and help to ID them as well. So having both of those together can really help. If you're just looking for ID, just get Merlin. If you want to do some communication with other folks about what birds are where, then you can get eBird. It's a lot of fun. All right, so Bill said the Paul Resende's Guide to Tracking is good too. Yes, that guide is really good, Bill. And the Stokes Guide to Bird Behavior. I haven't really used that, Bill, but I'll take a look at that one. So our next step in our naturalist journey, once you're really kind of delving in and you're observing and you're noticing a lot and you're learning quite a bit, it's important to connect with your community resources. There is a lot out there that that can help you enhance your naturalist skills and also share them. We're definitely not all doing this alone, which is why we're doing this webinar here. So just a few resources that are out there, and there's so many. Bill is here with the Last Green Valley, actually. And if you live in the northeast section, eastern section really of Connecticut, the Last Green Valley offers tons of activities to help people get out into nature. Sometimes there's like things like eagle watching for kids. They do stuff for landowners. So check them out online. The Goodwin Master Naturalist program is a very popular program. It's like all the other master type programs, like a master gardener or things like that. But it's a 7-week program, and we are restructuring it right now because of the coronavirus pandemic. So it's normally 7 weeks of some indoor and outdoor instruction and a handful of field trips all throughout the state. It'll be the same type of learning. It may be more self-guided this year, this fall. We'll see. If you're interested though, it's a great way to discover Connecticut's natural history. This state, we have so many ecological resources and great ecosystems to look at. We have from coastal to inland, there's bogs and swamps, and I mean, we have it all really in Connecticut, which is why it's so exciting. You just kind of have to know where to look. And that's where the Master Naturalist program comes in. Also, you can join a community of statewide naturalists. So once you complete this program, you're part of the naturalist community. We have a Facebook page, and our Master Naturalists are all over the state doing projects, teaching other people, and just talking to each other and getting their naturalist skills improved over the years. So if you're interested in that program, feel free to let me know. Feel free to send me an email, and I'll let you know what we're doing for the fall for that. So I apologize for the insane amount of text here, but if you want to take a screenshot of this, feel free. Like I said, I will be sending you the video, but there's some more learning resources. Goodwin Conservation Center, like I mentioned, we offer ongoing educational programs for the public. There's also over 17 miles of trails. There's ponds for boating, kayaking, canoeing, that kind of thing. Connecticut Forest and Park Association, we also offer programs. We specialize in programs for landowners. So if you're a woodland landowner and you're thinking about how to manage your land, maybe for wildlife or for timber, for other reasons, check us out. We're having a weekend in the fall called Coverts, and that will also possibly be partially virtual, but Coverts is great. You can just learn about what you can do with your land to help sustainably manage it. Deep has a lot of resources. There's some websites, Backyard Exploration video series, which goes into just all the different wildlife around, and they're great videos. There's a family resource page where you can get activities, things to do with your kids. And Project Learning Tree also, there's a lot of family resources. The Yukon Master Gardener program is very popular. A lot of the master gardeners end up doing some work in the Goodwin gardens. But if you really want to dive deep into plants, I would suggest doing that. Also, I mentioned it before, but I didn't have room on here. Oh, wait, you know what? Never mind. I did it in the next one. The Master Wildlife. Oh, no, I didn't include it. Sorry. The Master Wildlife Conservationist program through DEEP is a great program. It's focused solely on wildlife. So if you want to really learn about Connecticut's wildlife, it's a great way to go. Citizen science opportunities. There's some web pages on the DEEP website for just a whole bunch of opportunities. So citizen science is basically, if you see something, you're going to report it. So there's a great bobcat program where folks were reporting bobcat sightings to DEEP, and they use that data. They use that data in their decision making and in their science. BioBlitz is a really fun thing that you could do with adults or kids. It's a great thing to do with groups of youth. You could do it separately now. You don't have to all be together in the same space, but a BioBlitz is basically taking a bunch, setting a time and having a bunch of people go outside at that time and observe. You're just taking a snapshot of nature at that time and making lists of what you saw. It's a lot of fun. And Christmas bird count every winter with Audubon. The great thing about these citizen science opportunities is this data is used. It's used by scientists. And so you can be part of something very important. So, oh, Lance said Frog Watch program. Yeah, Frog Watch program is a lot of fun too, because you get to go and look for frogs, which can be fun. You can listen to them. Susan Leavitt said, we did coverts many years ago and it was amazing. Awesome. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Susan. It's still a lot of fun. It's still a lot of fun. So last but not least, as a naturalist, your responsibility is to share what you've learned with others. So whether that's someone in your family or in your household, or you volunteer for DEEP or CFPA or any other local nature center, things like that. You could protect your own property, you could steward your own property, and get other people involved with nature. Maybe there's some kids that are in your life and you want to teach them what you know. So what we're going to do right now, I'm happy to answer questions, but I have a few quiz questions for you, and this is nothing you're going to pass or fail, right? But like I mentioned in the beginning, it's important that when we're starting this process to really learn about the natural world, that we're really making a goal so we don't become overwhelmed. So these 3 questions are going to help you make a goal. So in a moment, I'm going to pop up a screen on your screen, and you can just click and answer the questions and submit it. And once everybody submits, we'll see what we got. Now, if you're not using a screen, that's okay. I will read these out loud and just have the answer for yourself so you can start setting your own goals as a naturalist. So let me share this here. Okay, so you should see a poll up there. And the first question I'll read for the folks that don't have a screen is, which of these natural areas will you explore? A, your home, B, your town or city park, C, a state park, D, a land trust property, or E, other natural area like a cemetery, museum, or nature preserve. Question 2, for the folks who don't have a screen, is which naturalist topic would you like to explore first? What topic are you going to delve into? A, birds, B, plants, C, mammals, D, reptiles and amphibians, E, insects, or F, other? And the last one, number 3, is what resources would you like to use in your naturalist journey? A, apps and other web-based resources. B, printed field guides. C, natural history books or movies. D, online naturalist training courses. E, in-person naturalist training courses, or other. And I'll give you all a minute to answer here. All right, it looks like most people have answered. Oh, we got a couple more. All right, I think that should be good. So I'm going to share these with you now. So it looks like most of us are going to explore our backyards, which is great. Which of these areas would you explore? And a lot of people will head to their state park or land trust property. Awesome. It's a great place to go. And I'm actually really curious about the other natural areas, because about 8 of you said that you would check those out. Cemeteries, I know it sounds silly, but cemeteries are really great places to go to observe nature. You can see a lot, even like things like fox dens I've seen in cemeteries. It's amazing. So number 2, which naturalist topic would you explore? Oh, wow, this group is super into birds. That's awesome. Birds is another top. Yeah, you'll never get bored watching birds. Plus you get, if you go to the ocean, you see different kind of birds, and then in the forest, it's very habitat based. So some plants and mammals and some other. Let me know what that other is. I'm really curious, that one person who said other. And what resources would you like to use in your naturalist journey? I love that most of us are going to use printed field guides still. And a lot of us are going to use apps. And then some of us are going to use some courses. A little bit less than half will do some in-person or online training courses, which is good. One thing I want to mention about apps and field guides, when you do your ID, remember I said always check your ID with somebody. If you can't check it with someone, like check your field guide with your app and check your app with your field guide. That especially goes to if you only use apps, you've got to check it with a field guide, because sometimes mistakes can happen, especially with those crowd-based identifications. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, and those sound like some really good plans. All right, so now is the time. I'm wondering if anyone has any questions. I threw a lot of info at you real quickly. So feel free to type your questions into the chat box. If you don't have or you can't find a chat box, you can also raise your hand and I can unmute you. Joanne Murray's asking any specific resources for identifying bird songs. That's a really good question. So the Merlin app has, when you go in and you get to a bird, you can listen to its song. But if you go on the other app, the bird, what's the other Cornell one, the bird ID? Yeah. You can record a snippet of a bird song and put it on there as well. There's also some bird sound classes that I can send you as well, like birding by ear, it's called. You can take like courses on that, online courses. I don't remember the exact It might be Cornell, but I don't remember. So email me if you want that exact. Will you be able to send us a copy of the video? Yes, I will email everyone a copy of this webinar. And because I know there's a lot of info on there. It's very info heavy. And okay, if you want info on the birding by ear, my email is right here. Feel free to email me. And I will send you that. Thank you very much, Melissa, for coming. Bill, I'll send you that too. Awesome. Any other questions? Looks like no. Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming. I appreciate it. It's a nice day. Maybe we can all get outside now and go observe nature. Thank you very much. Bye, Joanne.